Hi everybody, it's me, Benjamin Krudwig, and this is an episode of Design Time Reviews. So, as you may have remembered from previous episodes of Design Time, I'm frequently sent yarn or other fiber arts tools to review and let everybody know what I think about them. So earlier this year, I was sent a couple of skeins of Manos Del Uruguay, or Uruguay Feliz. This is the tag here. It's a 70% merino superwash and 30% modal yarn, and each skein is 350 yards per 3.5 ounces. I would call it approximately a sport weight yarn. Um, it's it's kind of in between sport weight and fingering weight. That's how I would classify it. Anyway, so I was sent this yarn to review. I was asked what color I would like to choose, and I chose Stellar. And I want to show you what I made with this yarn. So I requested 2 skeins of this yarn, and I decided to weave up a scarf to try to use as much of the yarn as I could, and I succeeded in doing so. And you'll have to excuse me, I do wear this scarf, so it's a little bit wrinkly right now. But as you can see, this yarn, the Stellar colorway, has some really beautiful tones of gold, blue, green, brown, all sorts of colors in there. And I just thought it was a really, really lovely skein of yarn. I did wonder how it was going to work up in weaving, and because it is a variegated yarn, um, you would almost call it it's like both a variegated and a tonal. It's not self-striping. It is not pooling. I actually ended up getting almost a pseudo plaid from it. Yeah, you can see, in particular, in the kind of goldy color areas, you can see a lot more of that plaid effect than in the other areas. And I just really enjoyed working with this yarn. The Superwash Merino is just like you would expect any superwash merino to be. And then the modal adds a shine and a luster to the yarn that's almost like a silk or a bamboo. I really loved how this wove up, and once I washed it, it sprung back a little bit and just created a lovely squishy fabric. It did full slightly, being super, or it's not super, oh yeah, it is superwash. Being superwash merino, sometimes you don't get a ton of fulling in the yarn because of the way that it's processed. This, however, did full a little bit. It fuzzed up just slightly. You probably won't be able to tell on camera. You can almost tell there's like a little bit of a halo on the edge here. And I just found that it really worked up beautifully. I'll show you the fringe here because you can kind of see a little bit better what the yarn looks like. So you can see that it's actually quite tonal, quite variegated. Yeah, I absolutely loved working with this yarn. I would highly recommend anybody who has, you know, any sensitivities to wool. This one actually seems to be very soft on the neck. I can wear it just fine without having any problems, and I am one of those people who's very, very sensitive to textiles, to wool, and this seems to be just fine, totally just fine on my neck. It's warm because of the wool, and then the modal I just think adds that lovely luster. Yeah, you can see it here. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. There's lots of different colors available, and I have started crocheting a hat using whatever I had left over. I didn't bring that with me because I actually have to rip it out. But it's actually really fascinating because it is more variegated in the crochet where it's not really pooling up in places, but you are getting more blocks of color as opposed to straight lines in the warp and the weft. I used my 15-inch Cricket Loom for this project while I was weaving it up, and I wove it at about 10 inches wide, and I believe this is about 8 to 9 inches after washing at this point. and I used a 10 dent reed. When I did my wraps per inch test, it wanted me to do a 12 dent reed, but I felt like that was probably going to be too dense. So the 10 dent reed really just helped. So that's 10 ends per inch for those of you who aren't weavers. The 10 dent just gave me enough space between the yarns that when it fulled, it created a lot more drape. So you can see here, it has lovely, lovely drape. So right now I have a cat on my lap who's really enjoying me playing with some, fringe in front of his face. Anyway, so just to reiterate, it is 350 yards per skein. So I used both skeins, and I didn't use all of both skeins, but my guess is that I used about 500 to 600 yards of this yarn in this project. I highly, highly recommend this yarn. Um, Normally, if I don't like a product that's been sent to me, I don't review it and I let the company know, hey, here are my issues with it. And this is one of those projects that, or one of those yarns that I was really excited once the request hit my inbox. And after it hit my inbox and I said yes, then it arrived and I got even more excited. In general, I really like using Manos Del Uruguay yarns. There's something about the richness of the colors and the tones that I don't get in a lot of other yarns. The other thing that I really like about this particular brand is that the quality of yarn seems to be really high. Every yarn that I've used from them, it just is a really, really high-end feel, and the raw materials that go into the production of the yarn must also be really high because I'm not getting that like scratchy feeling. Um, Out of the two skeins of yarn, there were no breaks or knots, so that was something that I was really, really pleased to see. Sometimes, and actually recently, I've had a skein of yarn that had 6 breaks throughout of it, and that can get really, really obnoxious, especially if you're weaving, especially if you're doing the continuous warp method or the direct warping method on a rigid heddle loom, because you end up just kind of basically using a continuous length of yarn as you warp up the loom. And any breaks you have to tie off at your back beam or at your peg and then keep going, and it can be extremely frustrating. I didn't have that problem at all. This warped up really, really easily. It didn't stretch too much. I think the modal doesn't stretch as much as wool does, so you don't get quite that kind of dramatic shrinkage after it's been taken off of tension when you weave. Um, yeah, so you can get this yarn at pretty much any yarn store that carries Manos yarns. If they don't have it in stock, I would highly recommend asking them to get it into stock. And again, the other colors that they have of this yarn is they're just really gorgeous colors. Um, Let me just pop open the color list real quick. So all of the colors that they currently have in this yarn are tonal or variegated. So there's Provence, which is Z997, and that one is a little bit of a more muted tone. It's kind of colors of lavender and I think a slight green, so kind of like the lavender fields of Provence, France. There's Marble, which is a lovely slate gray that's very tonal. There's Wildflowers, which is a really, really beautiful, just, gosh, blush pinks, mauve, lavender, and again, a hint of that gold that's in Stellar. Then there's Grizzly, which are nice warm tones, browns and golds. Autumn, which I almost chose Autumn. It's a little bit more feminine for my taste. It has some kind of boysenberry colors and a little bit of purple and pink. It it doesn't really quite read Colorado autumn. We get a lot of, the bright gold aspens and some pretty orange colors. It's not as vivid as I would expect an autumn color to be, but it is still a beautiful colorway. Then there's Stellar, which is the one that I'm wearing that had the beautiful blues and golds and greens. And then there's one called, oh gosh, Horace, and it's one of the more out there colorways. It has like a teal green and golds and oranges, and then a little bit of gray in there as well. So currently there's about 7 colors. The recommended needle gauge, if you're a knitter, is a US size 4. These are hand dyed down at the company, and the suggested gauge is 22 stitches in 4 inches. So this is a pretty fine yarn. It is what I would call a sport or a fingering weight. It's one of those kind of in between places, and it's just really lovely. I'm going to read the description off of their website. That way you can maybe see my cat right by me. So they say, Felice is a joyous blend of merino superwash and modal. Modal is a man-made fiber from vegetable pulp, and it gives Felice great drape and a fresh hand feel. And it really is, it does add a luster as well. That's not from their website, it's just from my experience using the yarn. I would actually love to work with this again in a knitting project just because of how it feels. So the drape would be really great for, I would say, a cardigan, a hat, or a scarf. A hat, while it would feel really good, you might have to go down a needle size to keep the elasticity of the yarn in there because I don't get a lot of elasticity in the yarn. But I do think that it would make a really gorgeous ensemble. So if you like this video and would like to see more reviews, I have some coming up. I believe I actually have another yarn from Manos that I have not yet reviewed. And it's not because I don't like the yarn, it's because I don't quite have enough to do a big project that's woven. And I am trying to focus on the weaving side of the textiles when it comes to reviewing these products. I have perhaps a spinning review to do coming up next year. So please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to get notified every time I post a new video. And I will see you next week when I do a video on my textile history. So where did I learn? What did I do? And what am I doing now? So I will see you all next time. Thank you. Bye.